Yes, good morning and welcome. You're still watching Power Breakfast. That was Wakati Band making for our entertainment treat this morning. And it's time now to take a look at the headlines. My name is Fred Indimule. This morning I'm joined by, let me start with the lady, the only lady in the panel, Eunice Lumalas, an advocate and a governance analyst. Next to Eunice we have Javas Bigambo, governance analyst, and on my right, Bona Vincent Kimosop, a policy analyst. Good morning na karibuni sana. A quick look at the headlines this morning, and we start off with the Daily Nation. Trump loads Kenyans and urges peace. Raila leads 6-hour meeting of NASA principals and summit on way forward, but options are narrowing, with UN rejecting requests to audit results and mounting local and international calls for peace. That's a big story on the Standard. The other big story highlighted on the Daily Nation, the Daily Nation, is the NGOs link shutdown to poll dispute. You know, the KHRC and AFRICOG are already in trouble with the NGOs board, and we'll be looking at that as well. A very interesting story also on the front page, and this one could escape your notice. Police probe 160 million thefts at ICT agency. That story is on the back page of the Daily Nation. Detectives are investigating a well-orchestrated theft of more than 160 million shillings at the ICT authority. The money was siphoned out of the authority between January 24th and July 6th in a scheme involving at least 4 senior managers and 2 banks. You can read that story on the Daily Nation. On the Standard, a similar headline: why Raila put off ballot bombshell. NASA leaders meet and decide to move message to supporters on way forward to today to give them time to build what they promise is watertight case against IEBC results. Also on the front page, autopsy shows girl killed by big guns bullets. Now this is the 9-year-old Stephanie Mora, who was killed in Mathare North after the election. And the post-mortem was conducted yesterday, and it shows that she was killed by a high-caliber bullet. Also, the story about the NGOs is highlighted on the front page. On the top strip, UN Amnesty condemn attack on NGOs. Down there you can see the affected NGOs standing and singing in solidarity, deregistered. And that story is also on Citizen TV. But even before we get down to this, because the issue of police brutality is still very much alive, and there are other stories on page 12 of the Standard and page 9 of the Daily Nation, where a 6-month-old baby girl died yesterday after being beaten by police in Nyalenda, Kisumu. Now, the issue of police brutality is something that we thought at least we had forgotten, yet we continue to get denials and more denials from the senior officers. Yet there's even some footage going round of the acts by police, and I don't know what you have to say about this, Vincent.
I think first I'll send my message of condolences to the family of the bereaved, both the one in Kisumu and also others who've lost their lives in the course of this post-election declaration. I think, my brother, as I pointed out in the past, there is no human life that is worth even the competition for power. And I think we'll continue appealing to the state, and specifically the police, to really exercise restraint. They have tried, really, I know, looking at the history of the police in the past, but really when we have headlines of stories of children who are vulnerable, who need our support, I think it is important to appreciate that our constitution really gives everybody the right to life. It is important that the police, as they say, utumishi kwa wote, that utumishi be reflected in the protection and keeping the very sanctity of life. The second thing is that it points to us that there is need for the continued consolidation and pushing ahead with the reforms in the security sector, so that really we can move from what we have known in the past as a police force to a police service. I know even from the media, from the reports, we are still talking about a police force, but really the constitution talks about a police service.
Yes.
So I think moving forward, one of the top agenda items of the president who will be sworn in, because the results, yes, have been announced, declaring Uhuru Kenyatta as president, In the event they are not challenged, or that they are challenged and is confirmed, one of the things that the first item on his table the president will need to address is the issue of national cohesion, and one of them is deepening and strengthening our institutions. And at the core of these institutions is the police service.
Yes, Eunice, of course, this election could be credited for quite a visible improvement in some of the organizations around the elections, especially the IEBC, the processes around the elections. But it appears that some institutions, and this is a police service, are yet to move on from the state they were in yesteryears. That the descriptions we're getting about the police service after this election is just similar to what we saw in 2007, 2008, probably in 1992. Will they ever change?
First of all, it's in my view, it's a very right opportunity for all of us to be vigilant. We need a strong civil society. We need professionals who are able to stand up and speak the truth across whatever divisive lines we have. It is very dangerous, because we have seen, not only are we describing the police as coming out and probably we are being taken back to the days, we could say the dark days in Kenya in the 80s or early 90s, where police brutality was witnessed in that manner. But you know, for me, I think the issue is that technology is changing faster than policies, than the laws, than administrators, than so that you can see CSs, and even I've seen Degwa Mohoro, the director of CID, still defending the police and saying there was no brutality by police officers. So basically, their leaders are coming out and stating clearly that there was no brutality. However, it's an age of technology, you know, and even in terms of evidence, I think all is not lost. We have a very credible independent commission, IPOA, and in my view we need to really strengthen IPOA. They have done quite a bit of work even during this process, together with the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, in bringing out evidence and some information about this brutality and standing up and showing people what has really been happening.
Yes.
So much as it is a dark time, I think there's a ray of hope in terms of the independent commissions that we have, and I think IPOA has shown that it has capacity and goodwill to stand up for justice and the proper reforms that we want to see in the police force. However, for these specific ones, as a mother, I think I feel very pained to see this kind of thing. I mean, a 6-month-old child, we've seen an 8-year-old child as well. Why are we shooting to kill? This is unacceptable, I think, in this day.
Yes, Javas, there seems to be this general feeling that there's nothing that can be done to the police service, that they're justified in whatever action they take. After all, this is post-election and we have to do our job and we have to defend the service whichever way, however rotten it could be, however many mistakes they make, and there's nothing that will happen to them even after this.
Now, to answer that question, I think I'll venture into various schools of thought in matters rights, because I want to give it a rights-based approach. One, when it comes to matters human rights, there are various schools of thought that exist. One, there are the cultural relativists, and then you've got the universalists. And what is strong is the universalism, where the belief is that human rights are universal, that each person has these inherent rights which are owed to him by virtue of just being a human being, existing on earth. And when you look at the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, which actually tilts towards the universalism school of thought, then it brings to fore the fact that we need not, cannot, and should not debate the question of rights of citizens and individuals. Now, the right to life itself is sacrosanct. It is defended and protected by the Constitution and the various pieces of legislation that we do have. And when individuals are enrolled at the Kiganjo school, the training school for the police, their curriculum was revised a few years ago to include the rights-based approach, the issue of knowing to what extent and how they can restrain themselves when discharging their duties. When we got into the police reform process, it was important that even what informed the entire discussion of changing, even from the name itself, from police force to service, was that, and going even by the emblematic tagline of the police, utumishi kwa wote, it is a question of serving. This service itself comes with the humane part of the discharging of those duties. And that is why every observer, citizen or not, has come to the conclusion that the police must be themselves most helpful for protecting rights, for protecting lives. Whatever has now been witnessed, whether it is in Kisumu, whether it is in Madari, or whether it is in Kibra, and the reported cases of deaths, and even the autopsy report, you see, it is something that makes us crestfallen, that we still have policemen and women who are trigger happy. Whatever the situation, we know very well that, yes, and even the spokesman of the police has said that when the lives of policemen and women is threatened, then they find themselves having to defend their own lives. But then the question would arise, what kind of threat was a young child posing to the police? And whether this child and other persons there were armed. These are questions that, or whose answers have been very difficult to find. But now, even the answers to those questions depend on where somebody stands. But now, where do we stand as citizens? Where do we stand as Democrats? Where do we stand as people who believe in institutions and the rule of law?
My brother,
I think moving forward, do we have a solution to this? Because the general feeling is that nothing will happen to this policemen or police officers who are involved in this, because their leaders are defending them.
In Dumuli, something can happen. Just before my brother Vincent responds, look, there are those international best practices. The leadership of the police can go for benchmarking if they like. Look, haven't we witnessed demonstrations, picketing, etc., even riots organized by the public in the United Kingdom? Haven't we witnessed the same even in the United States of America? Have we seen individuals being wantonly murdered or killed just because they are demonstrating, just because they are picketing? The answer is no.
I think I wanted just to add something, Javas, and sorry, I think when it comes to the issue of life, we should all be on the same point. As in, it will be unfortunate fact that when we are talking about a human life, a child, that even those things you're pointing out, the partisanship, and a life is God-given. Life is sacred, and irrespective of where you stand, irrespective, we should not cross our conscience. We should have our conscience should be alive. That, hey, on issues to do with life, on these ones, there is no conversation. Since we're talking about democracy, when I think Libni and Netanyahu were running for prime minister in Israel, as Israelis, they said on the issue, for example, on Iran, there is no opposition. We are all on the same position because this is about Israel. Our differences would be maybe in public policy, housing and everything. That's where you judge us. I think I would appeal to each one of us that when it comes to the issue of life, it should not matter. We should not say, oh, all of us should stand on the same side and say a wrong is a wrong, and really says that we should all protect life, because as I said, it is protected by the Constitution. Everybody has a right. Yes. There might be justifications at times that police would want to say or even say it was done by criminals, but I will appeal to the conscience of every human being that when it comes to the matter of life, we should not be this side or the other.
Okay. But my final contribution on that one is that there is nothing stopping the family from taking the government to court, and I think they may need to think about that, because in this era where evidence is recorded and people are vigilant about what is happening, if you're able to prove that a certain officer actually came and brutalized you, and we've seen some recording. Also, it's an era of fake news, so you will need to be able to sift that. Yes. If you're able to actually prove it, there's nothing stopping the family from moving forward and finding the state probably culpable. Okay.
Yeah, because of time, I want us to move to other headlines, because you're about 10 or 15 minutes or so. Of course, the big one is we're still awaiting the NASA big announcement from NASA. Not much can be said about it. Of course, their options seem to be running out, with the UN now saying no to that request to audit the election results. So we still await to see what Raila Odinga will say in his big announcement today. I would want us to look at this issue to do with the NGOs protest and the shutdown by the NGOs board of KHRC and Africa. Now, this is one other very retrogressive move, because yes, one is a police force. The kind of behavior we are seeing in 2017 is not what we expected. So much has changed. We've made so much progress in the electoral process, yet you see some institutions taking us to those dark days. The police service is one of them. Now the NGO Council cracking down on NGOs that seem to be probably anti-establishment or probably allied to one side of the political divide. Don't you think that these are stories that we used to read back in the 1992?
I think, Fred, I worked for civil society, Transparency International, to be specific, an international institute for legislative affairs. One thing that is that it should be very clear that no one is above the law. So both civil society and also government institutions are guided by the law. And one thing I'm impressed is that the civil society have come out clearly and they were united in saying this is a wrong, and they not only went ahead to point out this is a wrong, they also went to point out who is on the wrong. I listened to the press conference. They actually pointed out that the Ombuds's office, which is a government institution, has said there is a problem at the NGO Council. They also went ahead to say that even EACC has pointed out. So the summative condemnation of the state is we are moving to holding people individually and institutionally responsible. So in my view, I think the reminder that we give to Fazul and the NGO Council is that obey the law. Do not allow yourselves to be used for short-term gains. That, actually, do you know, even according to the law, the NGO Council, we should be the public benefits organization. Is the statute that should be governing the sector. So even as in this action by the NGO Council, in my view, will not stand the minimum standards of scrutiny, and in the event the KHRC and Africa go ahead to court, I can tell you that the Constitution says it recognizes institutions registered and even unregistered institutions. Then finally, what I would want to point out on this issue is that we should also not sweep everything under the carpet. Yes, by saying no to what NGO Council is doing, is that if there are accountability issues within the civil society, we should also be able to have the courage to say, yes, you're doing a good watchdog role, but let's all ensure that all our work is above board.
Shouldn't that watchdog role be across board, that you should not be seen for the NGOs board to be targeting certain NGOs, because you can list them, and they were listed there at that press briefing. The Kidero Foundation, they targeted Kalonzo Musyoka Foundation, they targeted a foundation linked to Rosemary Odinga.
Key Empowerment.
Yeah, now they're targeting KHRC, AFRICOG, which were said to probably be some of those organizations that could have been used as proxies to file a petition in court to challenge these election results. Don't you think that it's rather obvious that even the Kenyans can see that this kind of watchdog role the NGO body is playing is one-sided?
I think if we leave it to the Kenyans to see, we can see different shades of sides. If we leave it to Kenyans to see at this time.
Are you saying that someone don't see that being one-sided?
Well, the timing is suspect. The timing of going after these organizations is is all wrong. Okay, and that's where, in my view, there's just open impunity. You can do it in a certain way if there is actually value in what you're doing, or there's probable cause to go after these organizations. Well, looking at the timing, it's very uncomfortable. to the government. I would find it that way. However, it's very clear that even you and I or anyone else, if, for example, your employer at TI finds that you have misappropriated, okay, God forbid, or done something, they need to give you proper notice. They need to give you proper notice, and the law is clear as well in terms of the NGO. You need to give them a notice of cancellation, which is 14 days under the Act. We've not seen that kind of notice being given. We've just seen a letter. Actually, when you look at the wording of the letter, it's very intimidating, very high-handed. You can actually feel the high-handedness just by looking at the writing on the letter, and I think for me it's unacceptable.
Yet the understanding is that the NGO board is supposed to actually facilitate better performance of these organizations and not just cracking down on them.
Very true. There are some overtures that are self-evident in this whole charade. One, that we find that Fazul himself has given directions to the central bank governor and then to the director of criminal investigations. I don't know where Brother Fazul finds the courage to direct the CID director and the governor of the central bank.
Even Kerry.
And even Kerry. That is rare courage that has got no founding in the provisions of the law. That bravado is not standing on clay feet. There is some kind of guidance that is coming from elsewhere. And as I've delved into this matter before, various questions arise. One, that did it just dawn immediately on Fazul and the NGO board that there have been audit queries and matters of KRA, evasion of tax.
That just would point out on failure, to failure on their part.
It directly points to the failure on their part, that they have not actually just been sitting on their hands, but they have had their eyes shut for so long a time. And then there are all those accountability issues to them as well, just as much as the issues that are being raised about these governmental organizations. Now, another thing is this. Let us put all these things on the table. That if it is true that the issues being raised by the NGO Coordination Board are true, then they need to be taken to the trial of fact. Then that should be settled there. Those audit queries, let the responsible respective institutions do their part. But the other question is, by operation of law of the PBO Act, do we find strength still and life in the NGO Coordination Board itself? These are questions too that need to be found by the trial of fact. Then now, the issues I raised earlier about the directives being given to various key institutions. Do they even hold water?
But let me ask Javas, if on issues of taxation, who should be speaking? It should be the authority, the Kenya Revenue Authority. So I think you do not need to be a skyrocket scientist to see that possibly the NGO Council or the NGO Board is actually acting or executing certain directives that is beyond their mandate. And the challenge with this is being short-term in thinking. I have been a chairperson of a parastatal, and I can tell you, if you all you need to do is do your job, obey the law, and what will happen is that all shall be well. But at times, if you avail yourself to be used for short-term political gains, then at the end of the day, I can tell you the person who will be on the who will live in bad shape or left in bad shape will be Fazul himself. Because remember, there are also issues that have been raised about his academic credentials. So I think at this point is just to appeal to Fazul that no one is above the law. Let the law be what governs and guides the society.
Okay, time now for a break. When we return, we'll be discussing the issues to do with achieving the gender parity law in the National Assembly. We are seeing quite a challenge, and we are happy to have Eunice Lumalas with us here to explain that. And that when Power Breakfast returns.